Okay, section 11.1, looking at late 19th century urbanization and social changes. Overall, this unit 11, is going to look at a Europe that transforms and begins to assert itself in the world as the dominant civilization um, in really world culture. It's been that way probably for the last 200-300 years, but even more so in the late 19th century. We're also going to look at how the culture radically changes thanks to the emergence of the bourgeoisie in particular, more liberal politics being put in, the age of mass politics, things that we've talked about in Unit 10, but we're going to look at how it affects social changes as well here in Unit 11. This is basically the bridge to the end of our class. After this unit, Unit 11, we have 3 units left, looking at World War I, World War II, and the Cold War. So basically, this is the bridge which will take us to the remainder of our class. Okay, so urbanization, people moving to the cities. We've already studied in the Industrial Revolution the effects of this and the reasons for it, so not a whole lot of reasons to get too in-depth with those reasons. But just overall, population of Europe grows by 50% in a period of 1870 to 1914. By 1909, European cities have populations of over 1 million people, and you have a significant decline in mortality rates, especially among children. So people are dying less often. Birth rates are actually falling during the period thanks to more family planning and things of this nature. But people are living longer thanks to better medical knowledge, better nutrition, better housing, and like I said, in the middle class, people having less babies. Migration from the countries to the cities continues, although many people, especially in southeastern Europe, are leaving for the big bad U.S. of A. And that also, you also see that in other places as well. So, really, like I said, urbanization, people moving to cities, and people living longer too, and we'll discuss that more in later sections. Actually, we'll discuss that right now. People living longer, being healthier. A guy named Edwin Chadwick, who was actually in the DBQ we looked at earlier this year, has this idea. Okay, just track with me here. Big stuff. He's thinking that if you clean up cities, you're gonna stop disease from spreading. Big news there from the guy with the worst haircut I've ever seen. I mean, he's doing well for what he's doing with his hair up there. It's just sad, really. We talked about cholera and how it's such an epidemic in urban areas, particularly in London. The Thames River in London, basically the giant, or the Great Stink as it's known. But Chadwick believes, hey, if we clean up the streets a little bit, if we improve our infrastructure, then maybe, just maybe, we can halt the spread of disease. That this disease isn't spread by just odors. Maybe there's something else that is spreading the disease. And if we clean up the streets, then maybe we can get rid of that issue. And you saw a lot of things done to basically try and clean up the environment. The sanitary idea, which was Chadwick's big plan. So we talked about widening the streets. That had political reasons in Paris, but it also had, the reasons for making things a little cleaner. Aqueducts are put in to double the fresh water supply so people don't have to get water from the river where all the poop is and then they die of cholera and other such things. And then an electric streetcar by 1890 is going to revolutionize transportation, that people can go to and from and not have to, say, take the streets or take the muddy streets and walk on the streets, that people can get spread out and not live so close to their jobs, so you don't have to all live on top of each other close to the factory. You can live a little farther out, so it's going to have a big effect there. Also, just the incorporation of, in many of these cities, of parks, open spaces. You don't have to put everybody in a narrow spot. So really, for the first time, people are going to start thinking strategically about how to organize their cities. And there's the Eiffel Tower. 1889. I really talk about the Eiffel Tower a lot more in section 11.2, so I'm going to kind of leave that to that section just to show you that urbanization, the building of cities, is going to be a huge effect on European culture. And by 1900, just another little stat for you, only 9% of Britain's urban population was overcrowded, and that means more than 2 people living per room. So again, by 1900, only 9%. Now that number might be a little bit higher in, say, Paris, Netherlands, perhaps Germany, but it just shows you that when you were probably looking at about half the population, if not more, that lived in the cities were overcrowded. Now it's down to 9%. People are planning cities a little bit better now. People can live farther away from their jobs thanks to different implementations into these cities. So it's a great thing, not having to live on top of somebody. All right, we're going to spend the rest of the time talking about the bourgeoisie, basically, and kind of different social classes. And on the surface, this stuff is like, it's not very exciting. But again, in order for us to kind of explore and understand the culture of European society, we got to understand the culture of the bourgeoisie. I'm going to upgrade that to the answer for all of AP Euro in the second semester. Bourgeoisie. Remember Catholic, and now it is bourgeoisie. So take notes. It'll be on a test, I'm sure. Okay, so overview of the kind of social aspects at this time. Standard of living is going to improve. So the quality by which I live, a lot of that having to do with some scientific inventions. I'll talk about in 11.2 and also 11.4. The gap between wealthy and working is still huge and increasing. And again, the middle class is going to become more and more powerful. And then you're going to see inside of the middle class, different classes inside of the middle class. And we're going to talk about that, I think, now. All right, I am correct. So what is this middle class? I mean, what exactly is it? Who is it? What kinds of things does it do? Who's in what part of it? Well, in Western Europe, you see about 15 to 20% of the population qualifies as middle class. In Eastern Europe, it's going to be less, and in Russia, 2%. And hopefully by now you can explain why exactly there's less in Russia than in Western Europe. There's certain things that are missing. Again, that's a big story. If you don't know that, then go back and review notes from Unit 9 and Unit 10. The upper middle class, let's talk about it real quick. These are your bankers, industrial leaders, commerce leaders, top government officials, sassy Asian people. Whoa, that's not going to do well. Really, not just sassy Asian people, but smug, money-holding people. You just have all these people who are really out to gain money, to gain cash. They are your leaders in the community. They are your leaders in the financial world, and they're more of what we consider maybe today as the upper classes. Again, the upper middle class at this point. Your upper class is still considered a form of nobility. People that with the old money, but this would certainly be ones with new money. Diversified middle class. These are your sassy white college kids, your stern lawyers, your cheery doctors. No, basically you have your businessmen, professionals, merchants, doctors, lawyers, civil servants. Even though many of these people have what we consider money today, they are certainly not as, at this point, wealthy as industrial leaders, factory owners, and bankers. And then you have your lower middle class, and these are the more independent shopkeepers, store managers, teachers, clerks, secretary lady, florist owning we're open for business lady, and sarcastic teacher meme. These are your lower middle class. Now you can actually kind of characterize each occupation by how many servants they employed. The upper middle class would oftentimes employ several servants. Diversified middle class would have 1 to 2 servants. Lower middle class usually would not have much. There's another word for the lower middle class. It's called the petite bourgeoisie. So we go petite B. The petite bourgeoisie, this is a group, again, kind of your minor white-collar workers, if you will. Women often fill these positions: department store clerks, stenographers, secretaries, waitresses, nurses. It's really your entry-level professional positions. And again, they are kind of different because you need certain skills, more than just maybe a factory worker. You need certain skills to be able to work that position. So, big notice here is that inside the middle class, you have differences. You see more middle class bourgeoisie the more west you are in Europe than the more east you are. Okay, so who are these people? I don't know how that got on there. Let's erase that. There we go. So, the middle class, who are they? What kinds of roles do they have? What kinds of things are important to them? They are all about liberalism, the protection of property. John Locke, life, liberty, property, your natural rights. Well, the middle class who earns money, they get what they earn. They're not given anything. These people work for the money that they have. They believe that a government should protect that and should not come in and try to take that from them. So these men and women are oftentimes characterized as liberal. So, if I'm a teacher and I work hard during the day, record these podcasts in my pajamas, I expect to be compensated for that, if not tipped, for my great service. And then that's my reward for working so hard. So there you go. That's kind of the idea behind it. They emphasize rewarding economic success. Again, these people that were not born into a world of the nobility. They were not born into a world where things were just given to them on a silver platter. They had to earn it, and they look to be rewarded for that. Frugality and focused on planning for the future. We talked about the idea of cry now, smile later. Work hard now, work yourself up socially and economically, and enjoy your life as it goes on. And then we've also talked about kind of an idea of like 3 pillars before 2. With conservatives, I'm not going to ask you to remember these, but just to give you an idea of what's important. Family, religion, education. For a middle class citizen, you really couldn't get more important than those 3 things in any sort of order. If you don't have those 3 things in society, you're going to really be struggling. Religion sometimes would be more of just a traditional, maybe not so much of an active thing, but the institutions need to be there to impose basically order in society so that you could advance and do certain things of that nature. Really out of breath. I'm getting very passionate talking about the middle class. I'm not sure why. Anyway, they also were strong nationalists. As time went on, the middle class became more and more profoundly loyal to their government. We talked about the age of mass politics in the late 19th century. These guys are going to be the leaders of that, and they're going to have a lot of loyalty toward their government. Here's a portrait, typical middle class, upper middle class family, likely in the late 19th century. You see, it's the whole family is here, so you have that family structure. You have some cute babies. Let me get there we go. Baby, toddler, children, and Gandalf. So you have, all the classes of age there, but there's some other things that you could probably point out in terms of what's important. Old Gramps back here, Gandalf, Dumbledore, whoever you want to call him, is reading that newspaper, keeping up with the news, and also kind of the importance of education. Certainly this family is financially well off, so you can talk about kind of the financial success that they've had. They're good actors with their Academy Awards up here, Best Picture, well played. So you really do see, overall, kind of the foundational aspects of the middle class. And of course, just in general, the big old family, right? And you definitely see that on display being very important. Otherwise, they got all these random people and stuck them in a house together, which I'm not sure. But then, of course, we've got these reality shows like Big Brother that it very well might be happening that way. So we're not one to judge. Okay, so just a few words about family structures, children, romance, things like that. By 1850, Um, all you need is love. John Lennon said it best about late 19th century European culture. All you need is love. Romantic love now really supplanting economic circumstances, reasons for marriage, especially in Western Europe. The rising standard of living makes it possible for a person to have the likelihood of gaining an economic life after marriage, so you don't necessarily need it before tying the knot. So you have that rising standard of living. The thing is, though, and this is something that makes the suffragette movement so shocking, and also something that we're going to talk about in 11.2 concerning bicycles, is that middle-class females were monitored extremely closely by parents. Their sexual status was something that, was your reputation was everything. And if you were a high middle class young lady, and you were probably into things you should not be, then, your social standing would definitely fall, and you would be viewed as a poor match by the family around you. Even though the family didn't have as much say in the middle class world of kind of pairing you together with someone, then it still would be viewed with derision by many. Now, boys, on the other hand, would not be monitored as closely. The male went out and slept around and did things that perhaps was not frowned or not smiled upon or favored. There would not be as much social pressure against the boy. In fact, sometimes that idea would be celebrated, if not tacitly approved of. So certainly there was a sexual double standard going on at this point. Illegitimate births also go down. And the reason why is that there's still a high rate of premarital sex, but the more couples would be married if the girl became pregnant. Certainly, maybe that there would be an economic factor in that. Now, after 1850, the wives and their lives become more and more separated than their husband. And we can, look at, we've also talked about this in terms of, the factory system and how that separated the man from the wife. The man is the primary wage earner, whereas the woman is the primary domestic figurehead. And we've looked at examples of that. We've looked at how the woman is now at home, concerned with domestically raising the child. And you see this even more so in the middle class, because the husband's ability to work takes care of the family economically, and then the woman will be the master of the home, and the children increasingly will go to school. Women, though, will begin to resent their status as, quote, second class, and that's where the suffragette movement even was more shocking, is that these women, who were considered to be masters of the home and not of public life, again begin to resent that. And we're going to see in section 11.3 how women were certainly in the middle class world treated and viewed as that second class citizen. Okay, so take a look at that child on the right and show it to your parents and gain the approval of your parents in acknowledging that that was you so many years ago. Really, butter. My cousin ate butter. I never understood her. She was a little weird. Still is. I'm trying to think of something my sister ate that was weird that might explain the way that she is, but I fail to think of anything at this time. Anyway, let's move on. Children, they're not dying as soon. That's awesome. Kids are living longer, which means that Mama and Daddy, Mama especially because she's at home, Mama is growing more emotionally connected to the child. Okay? So, what you have is, back in the day, you probably have 9 kids and you're probably batting 300 and have about 3 of them live. And then, once they pop out, you're like, hey, kid, come here. Because you don't want to get emotionally connected to that child, right? We've talked about that. You don't want to say, oh, Tommy, I love you. No, Tommy's going to be dead in 3 years, so what's the use? But now, these kids are living longer since the advance in scientific medicine, the sanitary idea, thank you, Chadwick. All these things are happening to help kids live longer. Now you're more connected. Now you don't need as much or as many kids, right? Because who wants to get connected to 9 kids? That's a little overwhelming. Now, what you also see is that since families are economically speaking in better shape, especially in the middle class, thus the need to have less kids. Back in the day, you need about 12 of those little boogers running around on the farm, but now you only need 2 or 3, right? Especially if you're going to send them off to some professional school, which costs money, then you got to concern that too. It's really what we think of today. So people start to have less children. Family planning becomes more and more important than, say, it was at the beginning. Now, this isn't kind of the same game, though, for working class, because you still need a lot of kids to support you financially. You don't become as emotionally connected, and that has other issues as well. So I know some of you maybe not have that great of home situation, but some of you have a situation where your parents are very invested in your life, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that you aren't expected to die tomorrow. Now, maybe you will, and let's hope not. I'm not cheering for that, but it's certainly not expected, and that leads to a different emotional connection. Now, this has it's a triangle. Good job. This had a very nice little graph on it. And now it does not. So I'm not really going to get too in-depth because it did not carry over when I put it on the system. Just know that the working class is about 80% of your population, and that most people, especially in Eastern Europe, were still considered peasants. Rural workers, especially in Eastern Europe. Now in Western Europe, you have a little change. You have certain people who are higher up on the graph. Let me just go ahead and just a couple of examples, like factory foremen. Okay, they were known as the labor aristocracy. Okay, and that's a very small part of the population. But then you have semi-skilled workers like carpenters, like Jesus, bricklayers, things like that. So you have semi-skilled, and then let's just call them the scabs. Here at the bottom, the unskilled workers, mostly those were women, your single women, widowed women who worked in factories. But you also have domestic servants, which probably you would argue is not unskilled labor, but they were oftentimes fit into that. So that's basically the working class. So certainly that's a more Western European number right there, 80%. The higher east you go, the higher that gets, but it's not just like working. You also have to consider like peasants, and they would fit in with that as well. So you're rural poor. So that's really a look at social structures. 11.2 is going to look into kind of cultural changes, especially with, well, the middle class. What do they do with their money? Because they're going to work less, and they're going to earn more. You have those hours, 8 to 4, and then you have all this money. What are you going to do with it? So that's what that's going to look into, and then we'll go on from there.